Donald Trump is breaking records with his terrible approval ratings. In fact, Trump has the lowest 100-day approval rating in 80 years. It doesn't matter if you look at immigration, his managing of the federal government, the economy, his foreign relations, all of it is underwater. But why is this? Let's take a look at each individual metric and see some of the reasons why.
But groceries, gasoline, energy, and all other prices are down with no inflation. We have no inflation, and in a few short weeks, we've created 464,000 brand new jobs. Think of that. It's almost 500,000 jobs created just in a matter of weeks.
Let's start with the economy. When Donald Trump was running for the second term, all he kept claiming was that the economy was horrible, that Biden was ruining it, Democrats were ruining the economy, and that he was going to fix it. All of it. Everything was going to come down in price, and inflation was going to be gone. Well, where are we at right now? Let's take a look at some of these. Has food prices gone down since Trump took office? No, food prices are up. With everyday things like eggs, coffee, beef, candy, meats, sugar, bacon, bananas, and drinks all being up in price. What about clothes? Have clothes come down in price? Some of them a little bit, but shoes and jewelry are way up. What about household goods? Surely they've come down in price. Well, no. Furniture's up, tools, hardware's up, pet food's up, appliances are up, moving storage expenses are up, everything is up in price. Well, maybe our utility bills are down. That would be something, right? No, electricity and gas are both up since Trump took over. And of course, one of the big ones here in America are medical expenses. They are all up. Going to see the doctor will cost you more. Going to see the dentist will cost you more. Eyeglasses cost more. Prescription drugs cost more. Medical equipment costs more. Everything costs more since Trump took over. These aren't just numbers on a graph. These are prices. These are expenses for normal Americans, and it is hurting us. People cannot afford these high prices for medical expenses, especially when unemployment keeps going up. It is currently at the highest it's been in 8 months and shows no sign of slowing down. Add to that inflation is actually still going up at a higher rate than anticipated, despite what Trump says, and you can understand why people are souring on this economy really fast.
Would you listen to this? This is very important. Flag burning. All over the country, they're burning flags. All over the world, they burn the American flag. And as you know, through a very sad court, I guess it was a 5-4 decision, they called it freedom of speech, but there's another reason which is perhaps much more important. It's called death.
Another area Trump is deeply underwater in is if he's making the federal government work better or worse. 53% of people say he's making the federal government worse, and only 27% are saying he's making it better. One of the big things people are upset about is his gutting of the CDC. The new director of the CDC is Jim O'Neill. He is not a doctor. He has no medical training at all. He is a billionaire tech investor. He is currently now overseeing vaccine recommendations after criticizing the CDC for recommending them in the first place and pushing things like ivermectin instead. Of course, he's good friends with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current health secretary, and that explains everything since in this administration, you no longer get jobs based on merit, but based on loyalty. Speaking of RFK Jr., let's talk about him a little bit now that he's basically destroyed the CDC. Let's just quickly fact check a few of the medical related things RFK Jr. has actually said. First, RFK Jr. said the CDC approved the COVID-19 vaccines without any scientific basis. This is a blatant lie. The COVID vaccines are among the most studied vaccines in history. They had many large clinical studies and they all showed massive health benefits. Next, RFK Jr. says he had nothing to do with the measles outbreak killing people in American Samoa. But the Ministry of Health said Kennedy's visit and rhetoric exacerbated vaccine hesitancy instead of helping. To briefly summarize what happened, there was already a Samoan vaccine crisis going on. Medical professionals were desperately trying to get people vaccinated for measles despite their fears. During this time, RFK Jr. went to Samoa. He said his purpose was to study an unvaccinated population, but his trip was coordinated by a local anti-vaccine advocacy group who was known for spreading medical misinformation online. RFK Jr. then focused on spreading environmental and vaccine safety misinformation. 2 months later, an infected traveler from New Zealand arrived and started spreading the measles virus around. It led to over 5,700 cases and 83 deaths. Next, RFK Jr. said that Lyme disease is most likely a military-engineered bioweapon, when in reality, Lyme disease is caused by a type of bacteria that's spread by getting bit by a certain tick. He also wrote in his book, and I'm quoting this, "It's undeniable that African AIDS is an entirely different disease from Western AIDS." He was trying to say that the number of people with AIDS in Africa had been inaccurately inflated to enrich quote-unquote big pharma. He said that it was very suspicious that a large percentage of Africans diagnosed with AIDS are heterosexual women, and that's very different from the statistics in America, completely ignoring the abuse that these women in African nations face. RFK Jr. also tried to deny that he compared the CDC to Nazi death camps, but he did. At a 2013 conference for the parents of children with autism, Kennedy told a story about the CDC supposedly turning down a past offer from the vaccine industry to remove harmful material from vaccines. He said, "I can't tell you why they did it, but he's seen people get sucked up in vortexes and go to extremes and make decisions merely to protect themselves, and to him," he said, "this is like Nazi death camps." He's then quoted as saying, "I can't tell you why somebody would do something like that. I can't tell you why ordinary Germans participated in the Holocaust." He has also claimed that the measles vaccine protection wanes very quickly, although this is completely false, and 2 doses of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine offer lifelong protection. And on top of that, he's trying to ban the COVID-19 vaccine altogether. This is the man Trump has put in charge of our healthcare. Trump also forced through his big beautiful bill, which is widely unpopular with voters, with nearly 60% of Americans opposing it and 50% of Americans saying it's going to hurt their families. Trump has also taken over the National Guard in multiple states and using them for his own personal police force. He has already sent them to both LA and DC and cites crime as the reason why. When talking about DC, he says that crime is out of control and it must be stopped.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back.
There's just one small problem. Washington, D.C. only ranks 4th in homicide rate, so why didn't he send the National Guard to Baltimore, St. Louis, or Memphis? Oh, well, maybe he just meant violent crime. Oh, Washington ranks 7th in violent crime, so why not send them to Memphis, Detroit, Baltimore, Houston, Nashville, or Denver? Oh, but not all crime is violent or murder, so maybe he just meant crime in general. DC isn't even in the top 10. Why not send them to Memphis, Portland, Detroit, Seattle, Baltimore, Denver, Nashville, Philadelphia, Houston, San Antonio? All these are in the top 10. Why not send the National Guard there? Because everyone knows this has nothing to do with crime and is actually him sending a threatening message. And of course, we can't talk about Trump's handling of the federal government without bringing up Epstein. And by a whopping 70%, voters do not approve of how he's handling it. When Trump was running for president, he promised to unseal all the Epstein documents. But after Trump was told he's in the Epstein files, he quickly changed his tune. Now he says that the Epstein list is a hoax started by Democrats and that Biden planted his name in it.
Well, I haven't been overly interested in it. It's a hoax that's been built up way beyond proportion. I can say this, those files were run by the worst scum on earth. They were run by Comey, they were run by Garland, they were run by Biden and all of the people that actually ran the government.
Even though Epstein was arrested and all these files were gathered while Trump was still president. This has gotten so bad for him, even Republicans don't believe it. Once Trump became president, he appointed Todd Blanche, his good friend and personal attorney, as Deputy Attorney General. Once Trump realized no one was going to let this Epstein stuff go, he decided to send his own personal Justice Department to go talk to Ghislaine Maxwell. The meeting took place in secrecy between Ghislaine and Trump's good friend, Todd Blanche. Shortly after, they released hand-selected transcripts and audio of this secret meeting. Then Ghislaine was transferred to a less restrictive prison in Texas, one where as a convicted sex offender she was not normally eligible for, and her custody level was set to out, which allows her to leave the prison to go to work, although she has not used that yet. None of this has done anything to quell the outrage over these Epstein documents. People want answers, and they want Trump to speak up now, whether his name is on the list or not.
And I said I call him Governor Trudeau, but he's Prime Minister Trudeau when he was Prime Minister. I asked him, why would we do that? Why? And he was unable to give me an answer. He said, I don't know. And I said, do you think it's fair that we're paying $200 billion to keep Canada going? And what would happen, I asked him, what would happen if we didn't do that, if we didn't subsidize Canada? He said, we'd be a failed nation.
Another big area Trump's polling numbers are in the hole is on world relations. Since Trump has taken office, our reputation around the world has fallen. The United States has dropped from 60% of the world thinking America is a positive influence all the way down to only 46%. Canada dropped from 52% of the country thinking America was positive all the way down to only 19%. But it's not just places like Canada. Every single country on the planet, our approval rating has dropped. America went from having positive favorability in almost every country to having negative favorability in almost every country. And for the first time in recorded history, China is now seen as a more positive influence than the United States around the world. But that's his favorability among other countries. Why is his approval rating with foreign relations so low here in America? Let's start with an obvious one. When Trump was running for president, he promised to end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours.
If I were president, and I say this, I will end that war in one day. It'll take 24 hours. I know Zelensky well. I know Putin well. I would get that ended in a period of 24
You can break that deal.
100%. It would be easy. That deal would be easy.
Well, not only has that not happened, Russia has done some of its biggest bombing campaigns since Trump has been back in office. They've even bombed US factories in Ukraine. And even after all this peace talk from Trump, it looks like Russia and Ukraine are no closer to ending this war. Okay, what about the Israel-Gaza conflict? Trump said he wanted to quickly end that. I think we all know what happened there. Israel has been bombing Gaza harder than ever, and both Israel and the United States have proposed taking complete control of Gaza and removing all the Palestinians from it. Okay, well, Trump hasn't stopped any of the wars he promised to stop, but he isn't starting any new ones, right? Not really. Trump has recently attempted to send US soldiers into Mexico to fight the cartels. He has sent warships over to Venezuela in what appears to be preparation for an invasion to remove Maduro, and he has threatened to use military force to take control of Greenland. And when Trump realized Greenland had no desire to become part of the United States, he sent spies over there to carry out covert influence operations. And when caught by Denmark authorities, the Trump administration simply told them to calm down.
The White House is telling Denmark to, quote, calm down over reports of covert influence operations in Greenland. Yesterday, Denmark's foreign minister summoned the top U.S. diplomat in the country after the national public broadcaster alleged people with connections to President Trump were trying to foment dissent in Greenland.
Trump has also tried to take control of Canada and has repeatedly called it the 51st state. Let's go over a list of lies Trump has said about Canada. First, Trump claimed that Canadians wanted to join the United States, when in fact polls show the exact opposite. A recent poll showed 85% of Canadians fully oppose the idea. Trump has also claimed that the US has a $200 billion trade deficit with Canada, but that's not even close to true. The actual deficit is around $35 billion. Trump also claimed that Canada had some of the highest tariffs in the world, but this is completely untrue, and in fact Canada had a lower average, 1.37%, than the United States, 1.49%. Trump claimed that Canada raised their dairy tariffs on us during the Biden administration, but this was not true. Canada did not raise its dairy tariffs during the Biden administration. Trump claimed that Canada spends less than 1% of their GDP on defense, but that's just not true. Canada spent 1.37% on defense in 2024, which is up from 2023 and up more from 2022. Each year they are raising it to reach the 2% target. Trump claims that Canada doesn't take U.S. agricultural product, but this is not true. Canada is the second largest buyer of U.S. agricultural exports in the world. Trump claims that Canada prohibits U.S. banks from working there, but this is not true. U.S. banks have been operating in Canada for over a century. Trump has also claimed that Canada is constantly surrounded by Russian and Chinese ships, but this is just not true. Canada has never been surrounded by Russian or Chinese ships, let alone constantly. And Trump claimed that Trudeau was using the tariff issue with the United States in order to run again for Prime Minister. But the problem with that is Trudeau had already resigned at this point, and the new Liberal Party leader was set to be chosen in 3 days. With Trump lying and threatening our allies, not stopping any of the wars he promised to stop, and even sidestepping Congress to give Israel more money to continue the war, it's pretty easy to see why his poll numbers are so low in foreign affairs.
All all illegal entry will immediately be halted, and we will begin the process of returning millions and millions of criminal aliens back to the places from which they came. We will reinstate my Remain in Mexico policy.
Now let's talk about immigration. Most people agree there needs to be some sort of immigration laws and a process to handle it. When Trump was running for president, he promised to prioritize immigrants who were committing crimes. But as it turns out, that was a lie. He's just trying to get his numbers as high as he can. In fact, 72% of people arrested by ICE had no criminal convictions at all. ICE agents under Trump are wearing masks and driving unmarked cars. They are grabbing people off the streets, including U.S. citizens.
5 U.S. citizens and 1 permanent resident now suing the Fed, saying they were illegally arrested and detained during immigration operations around the area.
Permanent residents and green card holders are being especially targeted. Donald Trump is hiring thousands of unqualified and untrained ICE officers and Border Patrol agents. Back in 2006, George W. Bush hired 8,000 unqualified Border Patrol agents. This led to a surge in corruption cases and complaints against officers in 2007. And it looks like history is repeating itself at a much grander scale. One thing both Republican and Democrat presidents have always agreed upon is to not have ICE raids at sensitive places like schools, churches, and hospitals. Well, that is no longer the case. People are being arrested in front of their kids at preschool. They're being picked up at churches. They're being picked up when they're trying to get medical treatment at hospitals. Parents are being grabbed by masked men and thrown into unmarked cars in front of their screaming preschoolers. And if they freak out about these masked men and try to squirm at all, they are then charged with resisting arrest or assaulting an officer. And what happens to these people when they're picked up by ICE? They're brought to detention centers and treated like animals. It doesn't matter if you're a 9-month pregnant American citizen, if you struggle with ICE, they will assault you. Well, if they're American citizens, how are they being detained by immigration? It's pretty easy when the quote-unquote border czar, Tom Homan, has said, and I quote, "Look, people need to understand, ICE officers and Border Patrol don't need probable cause to walk up to somebody, detain them, and question them. They just need totality of the circumstances, right? They just go through the observation, get our typical facts, based on the location, the occupation, their physical appearance, and their actions." The Trump administration is saying that racial profiling is perfectly acceptable and a valid reason to detain somebody. Let's get back to what happens to someone once they are detained. The number of human rights abuses that goes on in these immigration detention centers is insane. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of credible reports of human rights abuses. This isn't new. This isn't something the Trump administration just started. These abuses have been going on since these detention centers were first built. Between 2010 and 2017, women filed more than 1,224 complaints of sexual assault by ICE officials. In 2024, a case brought by the Department of Justice against the government contractor Southwest Key Programs cited over 100 cases of documented sexual assault involving children as young as 5. Southwest Key has received over $3 billion in federal funding to house more than 6,000 minors across Texas, Arizona, and California. What is new is the way the Trump administration is handling this. They've actually moved to drop the charges against Southwest Key in court. The Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties is known as CRCL. They are tasked with preventing and responding to abuse committed against migrants by immigration officials. They receive complaints from migrants, investigate instances of individual and systemic abuse, and implement policies that prevent further abuse from taking place. And they're responsible for ensuring that core civil rights laws like the Prison Rape Elimination Act are enforced in immigration detention facilities. They're basically the only way an immigrant has to report being abused, whether it's mentally, physically, or sexually. Well, on March 21, 2025, the Trump administration closed CRCL and the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service Office. They claimed that the investigative and oversight activities of these offices as an unacceptable impediment to immigration enforcement, blatantly calling human rights, civil rights, and due process bureaucratic hurdles. There are now no government departments responsible for ensuring that civil rights laws and the Department of Homeland Security's own detention standards are being enforced. Immigrants have now been effectively stripped of all civil rights, and they have nowhere to go to report the abuses they face, whether again it's mentally, physically, or sexually.
Well, let me just tell you that I got elected for a lot of reasons. Number one was the border. Number two was inflation, because I had almost no inflation. And yet I charged hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs to countries. And think of it, I had almost no inflation and took in $600 billion of money from other countries.
This has just been a tiny essay explaining just a few of the reasons why Trump's approval ratings are so low. In fact, the only president to ever have approval numbers this low was Trump in his first term. Can he turn this around? Does it even matter at this point? Only time will tell. Thanks for listening.